My guest today is Tara Mack. Tara is a British-based choral composer. Tara, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into composing.
I started composing only about 6 years ago. I have been singing in choirs for many, many, many years. And the choir that I was in at the time and still am in is based in London. And it was doing this 5-year project on women composers. So we were doing a lot of work with women composers, commissioning, programming, doing various workshops. And somewhere in the middle of all that, just started thinking, I wonder what it would be like to write some of this music myself, all this music that I've been singing for all these years. And I think seeing all of these, learning about all these women composers kind of encouraged me to see what it was like to compose. And so just really one day in choir, one day in rehearsal, it was sort of like a thought that was bubbling up for a while. And then I remember what we were singing in rehearsal, and I just thought, "I'm just gonna try and do this." Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. And I didn't know anything about how to compose. I didn't know how composers compose. I didn't have any I had very little formal music education. I didn't play an instrument, and I thought, "Okay, well, I guess I should probably composer probably needs, like, staff paper." So I ordered like a sort of letter size notebook with staff paper because I didn't know at that time that, people use these big. So I just got a kind of notebook full of staff paper. And I figure composers probably need like a piano, but I didn't have one of those either. So I downloaded a keyboard app for my phone. And I figured in these days, like composers is going to need some sort of online software for putting the music in. So I downloaded, Googled MuseScore and downloaded that and figured out how to use that and then just started. It's like, oh, well, those are probably the things you need, and started trying to write. And it was super slow and super strange. And I didn't tell anybody what I was doing. I didn't tell anybody, any friends, any family. Like I just slowly started doing it, but I didn't want anyone to know because it was, like, really strange like, I couldn't have explained it if somebody asked me, like, "Why would you do that?" And I wouldn't be able to say. So, I very slowly started writing and finished my first piece.
I actually love all that detail. I had never heard the backstory. That's really fun. So from that moment when you wrote your first piece, in complete secrecy, when would you say that you got to the point where you wrote like, "Hey, this is my first piece that I'm actually proud and excited to share with the world"?
Oh, well, okay. If you divide that into 2 parts, proud and excited, the very first one, because I did it. I did it, like, I wrote this piece from beginning to end, and it had a beginning, middle, and end. If you don't look at it too closely, it did look like sheet music, more or less, and I was like, I mean, it's hard to explain, but you'd have to imagine I had no reason to think that I could do this. No evidence. In fact, there was probably, it's another long story, but there was probably some evidence to the contrary. So that it was done at all felt absolutely miraculous. And in this bizarre way, you can kind of sustain 2 contradictory thoughts at the same time. I knew it was probably pretty rudimentary and bad, and simultaneously the most amazing piece written ever in the history of music. Like, really felt strongly both of those things at the same time. And then I didn't know what to do. I was like, "Well, I've done it. Is that it then? Okay, well, maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. Maybe I've done it now and I'm finished." And I kind of wasn't sure where to go next at that point. And I thought, "Do I wanna write another one?" And I wasn't sure, and so I kind of didn't for a while, and then something came to me, something that I wanted to write started bubbling around in my head, so I thought, "Well, I could write another one, I could do that because why not?" And at that point, I thought, "Well, if I'm gonna write some more of them, I'm gonna need, like, a teacher or a coach or an editor or something. Because I mean, clearly, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm gonna need some kind of help." But I didn't know how to find that, and I tried Googling, like, composition teacher, and I thought, "Okay, this cannot be the right way to do this. I have no idea, like, who are these people? I don't know." So, as it happened, there was a well-known British composer who was involved in our 550 in this Women Composers initiative, and she was at one of our concerts, and so I didn't wanna tell anybody what I was doing that I knew, but in a way, even though she's, like, pretty well known and, like, you'd think that would be more intimidating to tell her, but actually it was easier to tell her because I thought, "I will never see you again, and so, like, whatever you have to say to me, yes, if you reject me, I would be sad, but at least I'll never have to see you again." So I went up to her and I was like, "Hi, I'm Tara, and I'm in this choir, and I've been doing some composing, and I needed a teacher. Could you help me find one?" And luckily, she was super nice and did not think that was insane. Or maybe she did think that was insane, but if she did, she kept it to herself. And she helped me find a teacher. We had a whole like correspondence that summer, and it was lovely. And this composer, I should say, one of the last things that she like parts of our relationship that summer is she did really encourage me to share a piece with the conductor of my choir, which I was completely terrified of because I just thought if he laughs at or if he just thinks this is dumb or whatever, like, what am I going to do? Do I quit the choir then? Like, how can I go to choir week after week after week after that humiliation? But with her encouragement, I did send it off to him, and then he responded really positively and and many, things followed on from there. Again, yada, yada, yada. We could just fast forward because we're still in 2020 at this point. So you must
So,
kind of like speed through the rest of it.
yeah, no, I still appreciate hearing this because I think that what you're sharing is so relatable for a lot of people.
Mm,
I mean, even people who have gone to music school, right? There are a lot of folks
mm,
who like, maybe they're a trumpet player, maybe they're a clarinet player or something, and they just, they've just never given themselves permission to compose. And so
mm.
this, I wrote this thing and this is amazing. Like, it's a very relatable experience. So you've been composing for a while. And as you were composing for a while, what was the frustration that led you to eventually like start working with me in developing your composing skills?
It wasn't really a particular frustration. It was just the awareness that I didn't, I didn't know. And I knew I had so little, I didn't have any training in how to do it. So I knew that if it was something I wanted to continue doing, I was really going to have to learn actually some knowledge of how to compose. I had worked out by then that you need to get the big paper. But, there were still a lot of other aspects of composing besides buying bigger paper than a sort of letter sized notebook. So yeah, I didn't know how to compose. I didn't know how it was supposed to work. I didn't have a process. Before I took your class, I had tried to take at least a couple classes in theory, to get caught up on that, but I hadn't ever been taught anything about compositional process. And so having that opportunity through the wizarding school was, I felt like one of the things that I really needed.
What were some tools or frameworks that was in school that you found particularly helpful?
As I was composing and on this journey, I was looking for any sort of resources I could find related to compositional process. And, if you poke around enough on the internet, you can find bits and pieces of various things. And so I had literally started a document that was like, here are the things that I found, and I'm going to put them together so that each time I start a new piece, I'm like going to build my own compositional process, like sort of sewing together these various pieces that I found on the internet of how I should work. And so that way, like when I'm composing, I'm not reinventing the wheel every time. And I think one of the things that your framework added to that was definitely something that wasn't in my Google Doc was a kind of process of play and brainstorming and sketching at the beginning. What I had found related to choral music was a lot of play and exploration with text, but less about play and exploration on the musical side. So some of those tools are really helpful, not only for the beginning of the process, but also for, later on in the process if you're sort of getting stuck and how can you use that kind of sketching and exploration to help work through a stuck spot. So that's been really useful. I mean, this is something where I'm definitely like still very much an area of learning for me, but thinking about deliberately looking at other pieces of music and even copying them and ways of copying them, that was something I kind of didn't or would have felt like, "Oh, I shouldn't do that." I mean, it's obviously everyone's influenced by all the other music, but really looking at specific patches and think about how you can copy them or learn from them. So, for example, a very specific time that I utilized learning from the wizarding school was I was working on a piece. I'd been commissioned to write a piece, and it was for a competition where they actually have a composer writing a piece for the competing choirs to sing for every competition. So pieces had been written in the past. So the commissioner had sent me some examples of the kind of thing within this specific brief that had been successful before. And I get to a point where I've got a sort of beginning and then I've gotten stuck. And the stuff that I have after the opening bit just isn't working. And I remembered the things, about about actually just looking at other examples and copying. So I went back to the sample that he'd sent me and I thought, well, what did she do? How did she get from the beginning to the next thing that she did. And I looked at what she had done. And obviously, I didn't use the same music, but I ended up using the same sort of strategy because I was like, oh, I can see now how she got from point A to point B. And I can use that strategy. It's a different context with different music, but it was the same approach. So, and I was like, that's definitely something I picked up from the school and really helped me in that particular moment.
Awesome. Let's jump ahead to the most recent piece that you just finished. You just recently finished a four-movement work called The Choir is Home. Tell us about the inspiration behind that piece.
So I was really fortunate to be commissioned by the choir that I'm a member of. So the choir that was doing this focus on women composers back before COVID has recently commissioned me to write a piece for the choir. So that's really exciting and fun to write a piece for my own choir. And it was really a priority for me that the choir feel like it was something that I wrote for the choir, for this choir particularly. I really wanted to feel like it was organic to that choir. And so, as for the text that I chose, the choir just celebrated its 50th anniversary a couple of years ago and produced this video in which people were talking about their experiences being in the choir. So I went back to that video and watched it and found some really lovely quotes about the choir. Not quite enough to make piece work, but then I was like, well, that's not a problem because I'm in the choir, so I can talk to people whenever I want. So I reached out to other choir members, like, I really want to gather texts about people's experience with the choir. And I interviewed lots and lots of members of the choir and used those interviews to kind of create a text of sort of different perspectives or different aspects of the experience of singing in a choir, which while it draws from conversations with members of this particular choir, I hope speaks to anyone who's ever, sung in a choir.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as someone who has sung in a choir, it definitely spoke to me. And it was fun when we were recording it with Brevitas. I mean, really, it was only just a few weeks ago, but it's fun we were recording Brevitas, just seeing the reaction on their faces too, where they're like, they got it, all the inside jokes
Oh,
and all of the fun things in that piece. Let's talk about the process of writing that piece. What were some of the actions or some of the things that when we were working together, either in the group lessons or in working one on one, what were some things that helped bring your vision to life for this piece?
well, again with the copying thing, I had the opportunity for one of the pieces to study a particular piece of choral music that I've enjoyed, which is an excerpt of Benjamin Britten's Hymn to Saint Cecilia. And when saw the text and I was reading through the text and the rhythm of the text and the feeling of the text, that piece really came to mind. So then I was like, oh, great. So now through the intensive, I could sit down with you and really look at the score carefully and look at like, how did he construct this piece? And then use that to guide the construction of my own piece. So that was great, being able to do that score study with you and draw on those lessons to create one of the four movements. Another example of the way that the Wizarding School was helpful, or this intensive was helpful, was because I don't have as much of a technical background. I don't have a very extensive training in harmony. And I got worried when I got to the last piece because that I knew that harmony and a particular harmonic sound was going to be really important in this piece, the last one particularly. And I was not sure I knew how to achieve it. And I remember I emailed you and I was like, I'm trying to achieve this kind of sound harmonically. I'm not sure what to do. And I did think, like, what do you expect this man to say in answer to that? And so I was so appreciative and relieved that you were like, I can help you with that. I was like, oh, okay, thank God. So we had that lesson around, and you gave me some really specific tools to think about how to build the harmony and and the particular kind of sound I was looking for in this piece. And I took them back and they were genuinely helpful and really helped me, create the specific sound world and I was really happy with how it turned out. And the exercise you gave me really directly led to that. So that was another example.
It's awesome. Yeah, actually, as you're mentioning, I actually remember that email and being like, oh, yeah, because it honestly is a really interesting question. And like you phrased it in such a way that I was able to understand what you were after. And it's like, yeah, here are these exercises, go ahead and do these things. And it was cool as well to see the progression of this is the roughest sketch of this in exercise form. And watching you slowly chip away at it like it's a block of marble and turning it from
Mm.
like just a series of chords into actual music.
Yeah, I enjoyed that one. Yeah, that was good. I'm pleased with how it turned out.
Cool. Maybe let's talk about the recording process itself now. What was that like? What did you find surprising about it? And what did you find exciting about it?
I mean, it's really just wonderful to hear your music realized by a really good choir. And there were definitely moments of relief. Was like, oh shoot, okay, that actually sounds okay. Because you don't know, I mean, well, unless you audiate brilliantly in your head, like there's, I definitely put things that I think this is gonna work. I really, fingers crossed. And so it was effective. Some of the places I wasn't entirely sure about that they ended up being effective was a relief and was really exciting. So I enjoyed hearing it realized. I do find that experience very nerve-wracking and stressful because time is so limited. And because I consider myself somebody who's very slow, reflective thinker. And so being in a situation in which you need to make very fast decisions because your time is limited. And you also have to kind of make choices about what you're gonna respond to because there's only you can't just be like, this. You kinda have to prioritize what you're gonna say in the limited time that you have. And doing all of that, deciding and sorting and prioritizing in that little space of time is I find really, really hard. And so I hope someday I'll have another opportunity to have a studio recording. And so maybe the more that you do it, the more you get used to that environment. But it's really for me very challenging. And I appreciated where, you were quite I felt like I was being a bit I was worried I was being a bit mean. And that's why I was saying to you, there's no compliment sandwich here because there isn't time, but you're not the choir. You are. So put it however you want to them. But I'm just going to tell you directly what I'm worried about. And if it sounds a little bit flat, I might make a little face. And that's okay because it's just you seeing it. I hope that's okay because it's just you seeing it.
Honestly, this is why we collaborate with Dr.
Mm.
Matthew Nielsen. For those who don't know, Matt Nielsen, he received his DMA in choral conducting from USC. And he's just an incredible conductor, very
Mm.
thoughtful musician, studies everything very deeply. And for me, like he made it very easy for you, I'm sure, but also for me, because like he just brought in this is the interpretation that I have, and we're just there to support him more than anything else, right?
Yeah.
So when you find collaborators, like that's just something I absolutely love, and that's why I work with Matt. So now that you have finished this piece, we were able to record the first and the fourth movements of that. When is it being premiered by your choir there in London?
July. We premiered
July.
July of 2026.
Awesome. Do you feel like going through this recording process helped you understand the piece better? Are there any changes that you might make to it? Or are you like, nope, this sounds better than I thought, and we're going to go ahead with it?
There is one change that I was gonna play with at the very end, and I knew this was potentially a problem. The very last moments of the piece, the choir is on on an humming sound, and because the last movement is about the sound of the choir, that what it is to be inside the sound of a choir. I knew that what I wanted it in that moment was for the basses to go into the lowest part of the register because there is nothing warmer and richer than that sound of the basses really singing it in the bottom of their voices. So it needs to be, for the basses to do that successfully, it needs to be a piano dynamic in the choir. But because everyone is on a hum, that also cuts the sound of the bass, like it reduces the amount of sound of the bass they're making. And I was worried about how well they were going to be able to be heard. Now it's a little hard to tell with the sound coming through the computer, like exactly how well that was working, but I had a feeling that maybe some of the low bass notes are getting just not quite balancing as much as I wanted them to with the choir. And it just so happened that there was a little chamber group within our choir that did a performance of a piece recently, which funnily enough ended with the choir in a hum and the bass is in the low part of the voice. And I noticed that the bass who was singing that in that group actually didn't sing the hum, sang a vowel, an ah or an oo or something. And I thought, "Oh, that's really interesting. I wonder if that's actually in the score." And I looked at the score and it was not. So that was something they had chosen to do, which I assume was to bring that bass note out. And so actually that's what I've done. There's a real it works because of what other things that happen in the piece, having this running notes on that are in that end bit, all the running notes, which includes the basses, on a vowel instead of an that was the change that I made. That's the main change that I made listening to that. I also put the tenors on a lower dynamic. I was like, no, no, no. I'm going to fix that one right now. So that was a change. So I made a few little changes. So we'll see. Yeah, I think it was just mainly that. But that was interesting to be able to hear that because, yeah, I can't always predict it. I suppose the more experienced you are, the more you can predict how it's going to turn out. But some things surprise you.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always something to surprise you. I've been composing for more than 25 years at this point, and there's always something that surprises.
Yeah.
So that's very common. It's cool that you found some solutions for that. So now that you've gone through this whole experience of doing the intensive, who would you recommend this experience to?
I think it was useful for someone who's in my situation because, who needs education and composition, but I'm not in a position to like stop my life right now and go back to university and, get a degree. So I think that's one of the things that is quite useful for, particularly for maybe people who have started composing at an older age. You're not university age, you maybe have other work and family commitments. I think it's useful. And there are definitely several people who are sort of retired, So I do think that it's filling a need there in terms of being able to access some education and some really rich education, but without the need to go back and get a degree. Having said that, I do sometimes also think that probably the people who are getting the most out of it are people who do have, like, maybe have that technical background already and are looking for s- really purely processed stuff because there's still lots of technical, lots of technical holes in my knowledge. And this isn't primarily a class in that, so I think probably the more of that you have, the more you're going to benefit from than the process techniques that are being taught in the class. But you can still, like if you're in my position, you still get something out of it. But I think it's probably particularly beneficial if you have that already.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing us your journey, Tara. Congrats again on the commission with Oriana and good luck with the upcoming premiere up in July.
Yeah, thanks. Looking forward to it.